Hey guys, this is Dan from learningcameras.com. We've got the Nikon D5300 here, and we're going to take a look at some awesome cars. We're going to take some pictures of some Ferraris and Lamborghinis, so check this review out. We're going to have some awesome pictures for you to download as well on our website at www.learningcameras.com. We're going to be posting the raw files there, so you can download all of these full resolution raw files there and see some of the awesome results of this Nikon camera without having to own it yourself. Now, before we get started with the fun stuff, just a quick look around the body. Now, the camera is going to be dominated by this by this screen on the back. It's 3.2 inches, high resolution, over 1 million dots. It's a very nice looking screen. It works very well. It dominates the entire back of the device. Now, going around, we do have kind of an interesting button layout. We have a variety of buttons. We have the buttons on the back here. We also have your normal shooting buttons here. Now, on the left side of the camera, we do also have some other button controls. The flash, which is good, a function button, which is great. I have mine programmed to the ISO because there's no ISO button on here. However, there are also no buttons for white balance and some of your shooting functions. So, your focus functions, for example. So all that is going to have to still be through the menu if you use that function button for that. And then kind of down here we have the shooting mode dial, so we can change this from high speed, slow speed, quiet. We're going to get to that. The quiet shutter, by the way, is not very quiet. It's not like something like the 5D3. It's just kind of a slower shutter, but you know, it's not as pronounced as maybe the fast shutter rates. But it's a little difficult to find down here, and I do find it interesting that all the buttons are kind of scattered throughout the place, but you know, at least we have some of them there. And this is the only one that really is tough to get to. Right here on the bottom, your hand just barely never falls right into place on that one. So, but overall, it is a plastic body, but it is a good feeling plastic body. Everything's firm and it feels good in the hand. Nothing wrong with it at all. It definitely feels like a very, very high grade camera, even though it is a plastic body. Now, another thing is that the buttons on here are very firm to press. It's kind of even a little bit too firm, but I mean, it's not a big problem. It's just something to let you know. The good thing about that is you'll never wonder if a button is clicked. It has a very resounding click to it, and you'll definitely know when you press those buttons. Now, one more thing about the buttons, it doesn't have a lock dial on the front main dial, and I am absolutely fine with that. I hate the lock dial. I don't know why it's coming on so many cameras. I've never accidentally knocked it. This one's going to click very firmly into place. You are not going to accidentally lock this dial at all. However, the live view is very easy to trigger. Very accidentally. It's much easier to trigger, and you will do that on occasion by accident. So I'm very good with the lock dial or the non-lock rotating dial, and I wish that other manufacturers would stop putting the lock on there. I don't find the need for it, but it is pretty easy to trigger that. Now, the buttons have a very firm feel to them, and overall it's a little difficult to press some of them, but you know, it's a good thing. It's a very resounding click when you do actuate the buttons. So now let's take a look at some of the images, and man, this thing has a crazy amount of dynamic range, so we're just going to talk about that. The ability of the Nikon D5300 to punch the shadows and to lower those highlights and to create almost HDR looking shots from a single raw file. Now, you can still shoot HDR. It does have 3 frames of exposure bracketing. It's not great. I'd like to see 5 on there, but 3 is good enough to pull it off. And you're really going to get a very, very good amount of dynamic range on these shots. So you can really get some unbelievable looking stuff in those 14-bit RAW files. So another big benefit to this is the low light performance. I mean, I'm seeing almost no grain at 800 ISO. Pulling it up even into 3200 ISO, the grain is very manageable. And at 6400 ISO, you know, you're going to see a little bit of it there, but it's not difficult to clean up at all. I'm very impressed with how Lightroom handles this. I find that I'm able to turn up the noise reduction even more right now in Lightroom than I'm used to on my Canon. So without it really destroying the image, and it just kind of gives it a very nice look. It kind of cleans some of the lines and the surfaces. So, you know, not a bad thing at all to be able to push the noise reduction to get rid of some of that grain in there if you want to. But, you know, at 6400 ISO, it's very manageable what we're seeing from this camera. Now the Nikon D5300 does inherit a sensor at least very similar, if not the same, to the Nikon D7100. Also, there is no AA filter, so you're getting very sharp results. I'm not able to see any kind of moire or anything like that on this camera. Everything just looked great, even in very fine details. Now this camera does say that it has 5 frames per second for shooting, and I want you to take that with a grain of salt. Let me see if you can hear this here. It does have 5 frames a second. 5 frames is all you get before that buffer fills up. So you're going to get about 1 second of high-speed shooting, and then you're looking at maybe a frame a second. So not a good rate on the buffer. We're seeing that with some of the other Nikon cameras. They're putting very large image sensors in here, 24 megapixels, huge file sizes, and that's the end result on that, is we're not going to get some high frame shooting. And even that 5 frames a second, it really doesn't feel like 5 frames a second. It just feels a little bit more sluggish than that. Now, one thing that I do find is a little bit of a pain with these kind of lower end cameras from Nikon is that you can't keep the back screen on all the time. You can, every time you hit the shutter button, it'll turn off and it'll stay off. So it doesn't just turn off while you're taking the picture, it'll stay off forever. So when you go to take the next picture, you're not going to be able to see the information on there. Now on cameras like the Nikon D7100, D800, things like that, you have a secondary LCD screen up here that does stay lit. On this one, you do not. So basically all your controls are going to be hidden. They're going to be in the viewfinder unless you actually touch the info button, and then it'll light the screen up. So, you know, it's just something to keep in mind. It was kind of a bear when you're shooting all the time and you're looking to basically see what you're getting and what you're on. If you don't remember what you were shooting on, you have to press a button. So it's one extra step on that one. Now, it will save some battery life on there, but you know, I just wish I had the option to turn it on and then the option just to keep it to turn off every time I hit the shutter. So just something to keep in mind on that. Now, one thing that Nikon did that's awesome on this camera, we have 39 AF points, 11 cross type, really a great AF module in this. You're gonna have points all the way around. You're gonna control those points with this pad right here. It does give a display of where your points are on the back screen, so you can see those points. But once again, you're gonna have to have this lit up. If you hit that shutter button, you're gonna be off. So you're gonna have to light that up again if you wanna see maybe what your last AF point was. But tons of points to choose from all over the frame. It's really a good system, and you do fill up the frame with AF points on that. That's something a Canon has really left off on some of their cheaper cameras. Even the 60 only had 9 or actually 11 points on that one. So great job for Nikon for giving us some very quality AF systems in this camera. Now, unfortunately, autofocus during live view or video performance is not really that great. You are going to see some hunting every now and then. Almost every time I had the autofocus on, it did start hunting, even if I was taking a video of a stationary object. Also, if you're detecting focus between 2 points, there seems to be about a second or two before the camera wakes up and decides to focus. And once it does, it kind of grabs it a little bit, but it'll still begin hunting a little bit more after that. So not the best AF system in the world for live view or video performance. For something better, you'd have to look to something like a Canon 70D. That's basically the only DSLR that's going to give you a little better AF performance than this. Now, another thing that I want to keep in mind is when you're shooting with this camera, the Canons, for example, have a touchscreen, and a lot of Sony models do as well. It's become very popular on a lot of cameras. The Nikon D5300 does not have a touchscreen though, which kind of sets it apart in a negative way. Normally, that's not a big deal with some of your higher end cameras. However, there are a lot of buttons and functions that are hidden inside of the menu. Primarily, if you hit this I button right here, it unlocks those settings. So you do have fairly quick access to them, but then you have to go through the D-pad and get to the function. It would be much easier to be able to tap on the function and tap on the setting that we're looking for. So the touchscreen is nice for that. And then when you're viewing your images back, being able to swipe through them, pinch to zoom, it's kind of something that we're used to now with cell phones, and it would be nice to see on a camera model such as this. However, hitting that I button does pop up those controls. It's pretty easy to see. I definitely like the display on the rear of it. It is a very nice looking. You can go to a more traditional setup too. It also has a couple different colors and tones that you can select for it. So some very nice options on the D5300. Now the menu for this camera is really traditional Nikon, the same setup as we see on most cameras, and there's some good things and bad about that. I mean, everything is laid out, you can pretty much find it where it's supposed to be. However, there's not a lot of descriptions inside of the menus, and so if you click on something, you're not going to see a description for exactly what it is that you're trying to set on that. So it'd be nice to see something a little bit better in terms of a description. You've got so much room on here that it's really a shame for that not to happen, and there's basically no way of actually seeing some of that detailed information. Now let's talk about video for instance. So this camera does come equipped with a mic in, and that's great. So we're going to get very, very good audio on this. We do have manual audio control as well, not while shooting, but when you're in standby mode, you can adjust the manual audio control for a mic, such as a lav or something like that, or shotgun mic. So you can have a lot of external audio. The articulating screen is great for video shooting. Also, you do have full manual control on this camera. However, you have to unlock it in the menu, and it's buried in the menu setting, and I'm not sure why, and it's off by default when I got this camera. So if you go into manual, it'll look like you are not getting any manual shooting. It is just auto, but you can enable that inside the settings, and it'll override that and allow you manual shootings. Now, once you do that, you're treated to some great quality video. Everything looks great. Very good for what we're seeing on DSLRs. You're going to get that nice big sensor size, so you're going to be able to blur out those backgrounds if you want. I mean, no built-in ND filters or anything like that, so it's a little bit difficult in high light without ND filters on your camera to be using these as video, but they're very, very solid cameras. Now, the only thing negative is that we cannot change the aperture while recording or in live view. So you have to set your aperture while you're in the camera mode and then jump into live view, and then you can adjust your exposure via your shutter speed and your ISO. However, if you have to make drastic exposure changes, like if you're following someone from inside, where you might be at 1.4 or 1.8 on your aperture, and then you jump outside while recording, you're not going to be able to make quick adjustments to be able to compensate for that. So for certain things, this might be not a good camera for that. So something like weddings, where you might be following a bride from inside to outside, or from in a car to outside, not good for something like that. However, if you're just making very slight exposure changes, not a problem at all, compensating for that with the shutter and with the aperture. Now, video also looks good, all the way up. 1600 ISO looks pretty good. 3200 ISO is kind of the limit for me. At 6400 ISO, we begin to see quite a bit of grain in there. So, but 16 and 3200 ISO look great. So this is a very, very solid video shooter, and is really going to give the Canon 5 Ti, for example, a run for its money. So overall, the Nikon D5300 is really a great camera. I mean, you're getting stunning dynamic range, great quality, 24 megapixels, no AA filter, so you're getting really sharp results. A great camera. Now, it's a little high in the price range, and I didn't really talk about this, but it does have Wi-Fi on there. Now, the Wi-Fi functionality is very, very basic right now. You're going to be able to trigger the shutter and review the images, and that's about all you're going to get from Nikon at this point. They might expand that in the future via an update to the app, but that's all you're going to get right now. You also have GPS on that, so you have to take that with a grain of salt and say, I am getting these features even if most people don't use them all the time. That's what's kind of driving the cost up on this. So it really is about the best camera you can get inside this price range. To get better, you'd be looking at the D7100 or maybe the Canon 70D. If you're shooting video all the time, I might recommend you to the Canon 70D just because of the autofocus performance and then your ability to change the aperture while shooting. But this is a very, very solid camera if you're looking for something a little bit more inexpensive, lighter, smaller to take around with you. And you can't beat this 24 megapixel sensor that Nikon has put in this, and some awesome dynamic range.